Here we are, Rory having a cup of tea. How you doing?
Hi, how are you? Hello everybody. It's been a week since I made a video to keep you up to date with what's going on. Here I am out in my back garden, isn't it fabulous? I'm just home now on a break for a few weeks from touring with Mrs.Brown's boys. Good morning, Mrs. Brown. Last week we played Manchester, the week before we played Birmingham. And the reaction to the show in both of those cities was unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it. It really was unbelievable. So I'm thrilled with that, absolutely delighted. All round to Mrs. Brown's is continuing on, and it's getting rave reviews, which is wonderful, and social media seems to love it as well, so that's great. And I'm enjoying interacting with all the people on social media about All Round to Mrs. Brown's. I'm really enjoying that. What else is there? Gogglebox Ireland, I'm up to date on that. There's one more in the series I'm filming next week. I did one yesterday, and the last one is going to be filmed next Wednesday. So everything is going fine, and I'm on a nice little break at the moment, and Avri's here with a few questions for me that you have sent in, so I'm happy to answer.
Good, well, let's go. So, Sandra Shaw from the Rory fan page.
Oh, Sandra Shaw, I like that name because one of my favourite singers is Sandy Shaw. Anyway, what does Sandra say?
You do. And she said, we recently saw you in a pic playing the Kaiser Chiefs drums. Can you actually play a musical instrument, and have you ever been or wanted to be in a band?
No, I can't play a musical instrument, to my regret. I would have loved to have been able to play a musical instrument. I did try when I was younger. My mother sent me for guitar lessons. It was a thing to do to get out playing rugby when I lived in Limerick. But the guy who was teaching me guitar was showing me chords, and he was going dring, dring, and now sing along, and he went, Michael rowed the boat ashore, and that was my last lesson. I thought, no, if I've got to learn how to play crap like that, and I have to sing crap like that, I'm not bothering. So I never actually took up a musical instrument, which I regret not doing. I'd love to have been able to play the piano or something like that, but in our house we never had a piano, so that was the way it was. In the Kaiser Chiefs one, they were on All Round to Mrs. Brown's. And what happened was, before they got there, the roadies had set up two wonderful guys. I mean, I've never met such nice crew outside of Mrs. Brown's, of course, but the crew that the Kaiser Chiefs had were lovely, really nice guys, and they were setting up the stage for the Kaiser Chiefs song to be performed in Foley's Bar and All Round to Mrs. Brown's. And I just asked them, I said, could I get a photograph behind the drum kit? And they had no problem. They weren't precious about anything at all. They said, yeah, of course you can, just sit behind the drum kit. Now, I didn't play the drums, I didn't bang the drums because they're not mine, so I didn't want to do that. So I just posed for the photograph with the drumsticks behind, because I thought the big bass drum had a lovely Kaiser Chiefs logo on it. And that's how their crew took the photograph for me. And I thought they were brilliant that night on the show. They were absolutely fantastic. And that's basically all I can say about it, except to say I'm a bigger fan of the Kaiser Chiefs now than I was before they were on Mrs. Brown's boys. All Round to Mrs. Brown's. I like them, and they're nice guys, and their crew are just wonderful. So there you go.
So Sandra, or we'll call her Sandy, says, like you, I too loved the Beatles and saw them live. Did you ever have a Beatles haircut, and I wonder what you would look like with one?
No, I never had a Beatles haircut, because when I got into the Beatles, the 60s, I missed the Beatles in the 60s altogether, because I was too young. I was like, they were broke up before I got into them. And when I did get into them, I loved Mark Bolan, and it was corkscrew hair I wanted. Unfortunately, I had straight hair down to there. I just grew my hair long, so I never had the Beatles haircut, but you're so lucky seeing them live. I would have loved to have seen them live. I've seen Paul McCartney live loads of times, and I've met him loads of times, and he's a lovely guy, but I never had a Beatles haircut. I just like longer hair, and at the 70s when I got into the Beatles, it was a different style.
Good. Well, Gladys Jane Parks from Rory Cowan fan page says, do you think that you guys might have a tour here in Nova Scotia, Canada soon? I love you guys here.
Well, I would love to go back to Canada. We played Canada twice. We played for the Mervish group in Toronto. And the first time we did 3 weeks in the Cannon Theatre, and then the next year we went back, we did 3 weeks in the Princess of Wales Theatre in Toronto. And I loved it, and I would love to go back. And I know we're really popular in Canada, and I know Brendan wants to go back to Canada, and Brendan has a sister who lives over there. Hi, Fiona. So we have a lot of fans. I know we've a lot of fans over there, and I know Mrs. Brown's Boys is broadcast over there. We will go back. I just don't know when it's going to be, but I hope it's sooner rather than later, because I would love to get back to Canada. And I've never been anywhere else in Canada except Toronto, so I would love to see more of it. I would absolutely love to see more of it, and I believe Nova Scotia is gorgeous. So if we do go back, I'm sure we'll go out and visit you. But I think we will go back. We will go back. I just don't know when. I can't give you any update on that. Sorry.
So this was the story of the Rorys. Sarah Louise Baker from UK Fan Club says,
Hi,
what
Sarah.
was it like when you first went on stage as Rory, and is it true that you had to go on as the other actor playing left? I can't think of anyone else I would rather playing Rory. You're fab.
Well, the first night I went on stage playing Rory was in the Royal Court in Liverpool. An actor had left, and Brendan said, because I was his publicist and I was booking the gigs, I was at all the shows anyway, and Brendan says, you know the lines, you're on tomorrow. And that was it. That was the notice I was given. And I was petrified. I was absolutely petrified, because I had no ambitions to go on stage. I really hadn't. My background is in marketing and PR. I'm qualified in that, and I have a certificate in journalism, I have a certificate in philosophy, believe it or not, and I have qualifications, HDips in marketing and PR, but I was never, acting has never been my plan, but it was a case of needs must. Somebody had to do it, and Brendan couldn't find another actor to learn the lines in a day and to direct them in a day. At least I knew what I had to do. So I went down and I was terrified that night, and that's the only night I've been terrified going on stage, because I know that no matter what goes wrong, Mrs. Brown, I'm never on stage when Mrs. Brown isn't. And I know that when Mrs. Brown is on stage, if anything happens, she'll save the day. She'll come in and save something. So I don't have that worry that something will go wrong or I forget my lines, because if I forget my lines, it doesn't matter. Mrs. Brown will do something to bring me back online, or if I make a mistake, Mrs. Brown will highlight that mistake and go off the script. So it's great fun, but I'm nervous the first time I did it, but after that that was it. Believe it or not, a little snippet, Derek, who plays Dr. Flynn in the TV series Mrs. Brown's Boys, Derek Redden is his name. He was the original he was the original Rory on stage. And there's my phone ringing, don't worry about it. Derek was the original Rory on stage, and since then there's been a couple of other Rorys after that. So that's just a little bit of snippet of an information.
And didn't Pepsi play it as well?
Pepsi, who plays Pat Shields, who plays Mark Brown, he also played Rory. There's been a few of them. There's been quite a few of them. Few people who've played Rory over the years, but thankfully enough, I'm the one that does it in the TV series, and I'm the one that's been doing it for years now on the stage. And I actually do love it. I really do. I adore it. It's fantastic. So there you go. There's been lots of Rorys on stage. I was the first one though on the radio series that we did for RTE back in the early '90s. I played Rory then. So anyway, there you go.
You were on the radio show as well.
Yes.
So Steve Aramo from the UK Fan Club and Rory Cowan fan page asks, did you always want to work in this industry while you were growing up, or did you have other professions in mind, and what makes a career in this industry rewarding for you? And it says thanks for the opportunity to participate in this question answer.
I always wanted to work in something to do with music. I always did. Now, I didn't play an instrument. When I was a kid, I was singing all the time. But then, as I became a teenager, I was a smoker, and my voice went. I've given up smoking now, by the way. I'm off them nearly a year. But I was never in a band, or I was never in anything like that, but I always wanted to work in something to do with music or entertainment. I always did. It was the only thing that I had a passion for. It was the only thing I was interested in. I was never interested in anything else. I was never interested in business studies or interested in anything like that. Even though I was brilliant at maths, I was fantastic at maths, but I was never interested in that area of it. So I've only had 2 full-time employers in my life, and the first one was EMI Records. I started working in their record shop when I was 17, a record shop they owned, and within 7 years I was marketing manager of EMI Records in Ireland, and EMI was one of the big multinational corporations in entertainment. And then Brendan O'Carroll, I worked with him now for 27 years, so it's unbelievable that in a long career of working, I've only had 2 full-time employers, EMI Records and Brendan O'Carroll. So I've never worked in anything else. I've always wanted to work in stuff that I like. I never wanted to work in something I didn't like, and to work in something just to get money would not sort of suit me at all. So the things worked out very well for me. I'm lucky, but I'm lucky insofar as I worked hard at what I do and what I did, because I liked what I do and what I did. So there you go.
So Anne Leggett from the UK fan club and Rory fan page asks, Rory, have you always been a bit of a giggler?
Always. I tell you, I find the funniest things. I find funerals funny as well. I mean, I know it's terrible, but I find funerals funny. Not funny, but there's funny things happen at funerals. I will laugh at a funeral. I will laugh at sad things. I'll also cry my heart out at sad things, but I do find things funny. I find the funny thing in everything, and not in a bad way. I've always been like that. I was always a happy child. My mother always said to me I was always giggling and laughing, and I was always in trouble in school for giggling and laughing. I remember we had this nun in school, and I can't remember her name. I don't know if I told this story before, but she used to, in those days, when you think about it, where was Esther Ranson back in the 60s? In those days, if you were talking, she used to put gaffer tape over your mouth, and if you were fidgeting, she used to gaffer tape your hands to the chair, and if you were away from your desk, she'd gaffer tape your legs to the chair. But I remember one day, so my mouth was always being gaffer taped up anyway, because I was always laughing and talking and giggling. I could never pay attention in school, but I didn't mind. I just thought that was the way things were. You were gaffer taped to stay quiet. But I do remember one time there was this guy in our class, and he must have been laughing, fidgeting and away from his desk, because he was done up like a hostage in Beirut. He had his arms gaffer taped to the arms of the desk, his legs gaffer taped to and his mouth gaffer taped. But then didn't his mother come up to bring his lunch? He forgot his lunch, and she looked. There was a window, like a long thin pane of glass going from the top of the door down to the bottom, and she's looking in, she's waving like this, and then she saw her child gaffer taped. And she just went, "Me child!" And she ran in and she whipped the gaffer tape off his lip. And the first thing he said, he was trying to say to her what had happened, and he just said the nun. Well, the woman turned around and she battered the nun. She bet her up and down between the aisles of the desks. And we didn't help the nun. We did nothing. We were all just looking. And they pulled her, and she pulled the nun's, what do they got, the wimple or whatever it is, their veil. She pulled it off, and we were all just amazed, because the nun had hair, and we all, when we were kids, we just assumed that underneath the wimples the nuns were baldy, and we were going, "Oh look, she has hair," and even I thought that was hilarious, the nun being beaten up, which is an awful thing to say. But I find humour in everything. I do find, and when I'm on stage with Brendan O'Carroll, or when I'm on the set with Brendan O'Carroll and Mrs. Brown's boys, or all around to Mrs. Brown's, or whatever it is, Good Morning Mrs. Brown on the stage, I have the best seat in the house when Mrs. Brown goes off on one, because I'm right beside her. I have the best seat, and I laugh, and I burst out laughing, and I'm even saying to myself, "Rory, you're in the show, you're not at the show, stop laughing," and that makes me worse. You know, if you're in a church and you giggle, and you know you shouldn't, and it makes you worse. That's how I am with Mrs. Brown. And when Mrs. Brown goes off on one, I can see the twinkle in Brendan's eye, I can see his facial expressions as Mrs. Brown, and I'm gone, and I'm just held and laughing, and that's it. But I was always a giggler.
Well, Mary Lawrence from the Rory fan page and UK fan club asks, Rory, what date and how did you first meet Brendan?
I met Brendan first in it was 1990, and it was around September or October. Now, I was working in EMI, I was the marketing manager there, and Carol Hanna, a friend of mine, she was she promotes people here in Ireland. She's an agent for people, lovely woman, and she was working with Louis Walsh for years in Westlife and Boyzone and all them. Carol is fabulous, but she was promoting a gig, and she invited me and a friend of mine, Gary Kavanagh. She invited us to see this comedian in a pub in Ranelagh called the Sanford Inn, and I didn't want to go. I'd no interest in seeing a comedian. I mean, I'd seen Billy Connolly, I'd seen the big UK ones and the big international ones. I'd no interest in going to see an Irish comedian in a pub. I really hadn't. But she said, no, come down, you'll like him. So we went, and Brendan O'Carroll was on, and he was the funniest comedian I have ever seen in my life. This was back in 1990 in a small pub in Dublin. And I still think he's the funniest comedian I've ever seen. I've never seen anybody come close to him. So I saw him and I fell around the place laughing, and I didn't think anything about it for months later, when after I was made redundant from EMI and I was booking I was managing Christy Dignam at the time, who was a singer in Aslan, and I was managing the drag act Mr. Pussy, who's a friend of mine, Alan Amsby, and I put them into a pub in Finglas on different nights, and the owner of the venue said, the two acts you've put in here have to be their biggest draw in nearly 20 years since I've been here. He said, do you know anybody else? And I said, I know of a comedian called Brendan O'Carroll. I said, I'll try and find him. So I did, and I booked Brendan for a gig, and that's how it started. I got talking to Brendan that night at the gig, and we got on like a house on fire. He liked the way I promoted it. I thought he was the most talented, funny, hilarious comedian. Absolutely outrageous, but hilarious. And we got on like a house on fire. So he hired me as his publicist. And that's how it started, and I was getting him onto television and radio and in the newspapers and stuff like that. At one time I remember I even got him into the Star crossword. The Star used to have a big jumbo crossword on Saturday, and I thought, what am I going? So I rang the people at the Star and I said, who compiled your crossword? And they gave me the man's number. So I rang him and I said, Brendan O'Carroll loves your Star crossword. Could his picture be in it as a clue? So even I did that, but we've had myself and Brendan have had a great relationship ever since. It's just been fabulous. I've been working with him for 26 years now, which is a long time, but I've been working for him for 26 years and I've loved every day of it. I really have. I've loved every single minute of it. Luckiest day of my life ever meeting Brendan O'Carroll. Definitely it's the luckiest day of my life. My life just changed completely the day I met him.
So Sue Humphreys from Rory fan page and UK
I
fan club.
love Sue. How are you? I met Sue in Birmingham a couple of weeks ago. I met, not last week because we were in Manchester, the week before I met Sue in Birmingham. I meet her every time we go to Birmingham. Hello Sue, how are you?
She asks Rory, if you were shipwrecked on a desert island, what or who would you miss most? And if you managed to save one item, what would it be?
If I was shipwrecked on a desert island, I wouldn't mind now if I had to save one item. Well, but that would be me visiting cat Ructions. If Ructions could be there with me now, that'd be all right, because I like that cat, and I never feel lonely when I have that cat around me. There's something about that cat that I adore. But the one thing I would like on a desert island, what would I like? A raft, probably, to get off.
With a sat-nav.
With a sat-nav. I mean, if the island had electricity or something on it, well then I would be okay if I had a load of DVDs, because then it'd be just like a home away from home. But being on a desert island wouldn't sort of bother me that much, do you know what I mean? Because I do like my own company anyway, but I do like comfort. So I couldn't be on a desert island with no comfort. But I mean, being on my own would be okay. But if I could get a raft to get it off it, because I wouldn't be able to make one. I mean, these hands, they're used for waving around or for all this. They're not used for building things or for making things, no.
So Gary Miller from Rory fan page and UK fan clubs asks, if you could have been in any other TV comedy, which one would you like to have been in and who would you play?
Well, if it was a current one or a recent one, let me see. I mean, I love all the comedy ones. I like Going Back Steptoe and Son. I love them. So if I was to be in that, if they were to remake that, I could be sort of Harold's love child or something like that. I wouldn't mind just tipping in and out of. If I could be absolutely fabulous, I love that. Now, if I could be Eddie's, our hairdresser or something like that, again, just to be in it every now and then, I would love that. I love British sitcoms. I absolutely adore them. I much prefer them to the American ones. I think British humour is so much better than the American humour. The American humour, a lot of the times I find that it doesn't some of the characters aren't believable, but if you look like something like Absolutely Fabulous, even though the characters are sort of stereotypical characters or whatever, they are believable. I know you know people like that in the industry. You do know people like both of those ladies. You do know them, and they're fabulous. I love them. Absolutely Fabulous I love. The Vicar of Dibley I love. Dawn French I just think is fabulous. If I could be in anything like that she was doing, I would love. But again, just to tip in and out of, nothing, I wouldn't be interested in being a main character at all. But I would love to be, say, a hairdresser in Absolutely Fabulous. They'd have to write a part for me.
And Heather Wilson ends on an upbeat with, were you ever bullied at school?
No, I wasn't. I was never ever bullied in school. In my day, I did see people being bullied all right, but I was never bullied. I think it was always because I used to laugh and stuff like, and the bullies used to just think I was a funny type of a guy, because I was always a giggly, laugh type of a guy, and I was an average looking guy as well. I was tall, but I was, and whatever the fashions were, that's what I wore. I never looked different, which seemed to be a reason for people picking on people. They picked on quiet people, or they picked people who looked different, like whether you had glasses or whether you had different coloured hair or whatever. They did that, but it would never happen to me. I was always a happy person, and I wouldn't have put up with it. I would have, the idea of being bullied and not saying anything, even when I was in school, when I saw people, I used to say to them, why don't you say something to the teachers, why don't you complain? And they were always afraid to do that, and it was like, that wouldn't have been me. If I was bullied, I would have put a stop to it very, very quickly. But that's just the type of person I am. I know I was never bullied. Thank God I was never bullied.
You were telling me about a society that you recommend for people who are being bullied or something online?
No, I can't remember that now. It doesn't matter. Anyway,
Karen and Jess say we love you, Rory, and they thank you again for doing the fans Q&A.
No problem. How are you, Karen? How are you, Jess? Karen, you're doing a great job. Karen runs my fan page, and she also runs the Mrs.Brown's Boys UK fan page, and it's fabulous. She's been doing my page for years, and we get on like a house on fire. I saw her recently when we were filming one of the All Round to Mrs. Brown's, and we're going for lunch when I get to Newcastle. We are definitely going to lunch, but there'll be no booze. I'm sorry. Well, you can drink if you like, Karen. I don't know if you do or not, but I won't, because I'm going to be working that night, so I won't be. So I'll see you in a couple of months in Newcastle, and that's it. And we'll have a lovely lunch. Listen, thanks very much, everybody. I'll talk to you tomorrow or over the next few days. Bye-bye.
Okay, from myself, Avri, Citron, and Rory Cowan here in Dublin. Goodbye.